So in just a few seconds, I'm going to show you my latest data science project using Indeed's job data, Excel, and ESRI's dashboard tool suite. What I did was I took all the Indeed jobs that I was interested in, and then I took all the data, crunched it down, and cleaned it and displayed it on a map so I could see where the jobs were, what the content of the job was, and then I categorized and split them up into things like remote, if it focused on some of the skills I had, or what the pay range was. And then I just allocated it so I could see the jobs that I was interested in. And place is really important to me, especially when we're talking about remote. So that was something that I wanted to factor into this project so that I could tell what jobs I wanted. So I'll walk you through everything I've made, starting with the end result. So here's the dashboard I made with the final data. So on the top, I have all of the data set represented with the number of remote jobs, Python focused jobs, SQL focused jobs, and the number of senior positions across the data set. I also have a map that shows the individual positions of those jobs based on the city that they're in, if there is a city associated. And then you can also use this little widget of all of the US states to filter and see which state if you have a state in mind, it'll filter the jobs over on the left-hand side here. So if I'm looking for jobs in Florida, if I look on the left-hand side here, I have all of my jobs filtered to Florida. Down here on the bottom right-hand corner, I have the pay scale. So if I'm looking around and I see, here's director of data science job, the top range for that salary that was listed was $179K, the bottom was $96. I can click on this and I can go ahead and usually I can see that job pop up. But what happened there is because I had already filtered to Florida, right? It kind of messed with this widget on the left-hand side that shows the list of jobs. This one is on the far left-hand side. It's supposed to be all jobs right here. So from here, starting with the highest paying, I can just filter all the way through. If I see one I like, I can click on it. I'll have all of the details pop right up here, and they will go ahead and load for me. One kink in this data set that I didn't fix just yet is that all of the job locations for remote, I put the city and I put the word remote in the same column. So I have a ton of jobs that have isolated themselves to a city called remote in Oregon. So that is something that I'm just going to have to clean out the data set, but I didn't want to backtrack all the work when I was already at the end. So over here in the second list tab, you can see I've broken up categories by remote jobs, jobs that don't require a degree based off of the text that was submitted when they submitted the job listing. If they say something about a degree in the description, I basically consider that a job requirement. But if they didn't mention it, then I'll assume that they're not worried about it. Then the next tab, I have jobs that are focused on data visualization because that's sort of my sweet spot. That's what I'm generally better at in the terms of like data science as a whole. So I'd like to maybe find one of those jobs so I could kind of grow myself there rather than going into something like ML, AI. This is not like exactly my strong suit, right? Right here, I have this gauge widget on the bottom, and this just sort of shows across the entire data set the average pay, and then the max and the minimum of the top and bottom most salaries for what's represented across the entire data set. So on the bottom range, data science roles, at least when you search for in Indeed for data science jobs, if you go and you pull that data, you're going to see that the bottom, at least of the data that I pulled, was 50,000 and the top was 360,000. So that just gives you an insight into what the pay is, where these jobs are, right? And if you have a certain state, generally I would like to, if I want to go look, my home state's Kentucky, so if I want to see what was available in Kentucky, I can see in Louisville they've got some jobs, and I can see what companies are hiring there. You got a lot from Humana. That's a big one back in Kentucky, in Louisville and Lexington. So just kind of a neat thing there, just something interesting to see, right? So this is the end product of how I got all the data together. So believe it or not, I actually just used no code in the entirety of this. The only thing I had to do was write some Excel formulas to condition and clean the data. But as far as mining the data, I just used all no-code solutions. mainly in Chrome extensions, got the data down, conditioned in Excel, and moved forward from there. So let me show you a little bit about the data when I got it originally, and then what I turned it into. So when I first got the data, initially some thoughts that I had was that I had mined some columns that I didn't want. So like like when the poster was last active, I didn't really care about that, so I removed those. Some of the tags, this column right here was a little bit non-specific. There were some things in this column that sort of indicated some sort of description, but then there were also things that sort of looked like tags. So I ended up just cleaning out a lot of the data to remove that in general. Another thing that I did is I went and worked on splitting up the salary representation into either a column that represented whether it was hourly or yearly, and then the bottom range and the top range, so that way we could see. And let me show you that actually how that ended up working out. I'll just pop it right over to the finished data here. So that was helpful because then I'm able to turn those in integers and actually perform some math to see the top and bottom ranges, and we could figure out something like the widest or shortest gaps in those salary top and bottom ranges. So that's a useful piece of data. I had to cut those up into separate fields. Also, with that being said, I wanted to highlight whether there was salary info available or whether there was not, and so that's a point that we could use to filter. Another thing too, I was able to use the text from the job title to figure out whether or not this was a senior position. That was pretty cool. I was also able to search through the text of the description to see whether or not there was a degree required, Python required, SQL required, GIS required, which is all things that I'm interested in knowing across the entire data set. So I just searched the entire text of the description field and just determined whether or not those any keywords that flagged or indicated that were in there. I also wanted to know if the position was like an analyst type role, because generally, to my understanding, an analyst type role is going to be a little bit different than like an engineer or maybe like a manager or an architect or a strategist type role. So I wanted to know what those were. Not that those are bad or anything, but then from there was a column. Let me show you in the old data set. This is the old stuff here that had all of the company data. Let's see where it is. It had the name of the company or the state. Oh yeah, here it is. So right here it says remote jobs, Atlanta jobs, New York jobs. So I just wanted to isolate whether it was remote or what city it was, so I had to split those up. Oh yeah, here we go. So this one where it had the title of the position, and then it said in either remote or in a city and a state. So I had to split all that data up so that I could have those things separate, so I could isolate the city, the state, and then also kind of like what another defining column that kind of tells me what the title of this job is as defined by the person who posted it. So in this one we have remote sensing analyst, and usually that's going to line right up with what they listed it as remote sensing analyst, right? So there was a little bit of cleaning to do, and then once I did that, I was able to take that and put that into a feature class and host that inside of the ESRI Enterprise GIS portal. And from there, I just moved into cleaning it up in a map and then bringing it into the dashboard that I showed you earlier. Another feature that I didn't highlight here is I had a secondary map where I had clustered by state. So if you wanted to see the jobs, but you kind of wanted to cluster and see what regions had the most jobs, if you were trying to figure out like where should I move to, you can see that over in Texas locally, obviously remote jobs are kind of wherever you have an internet connection these days, but we see that up in New York we have a ton. Chicago, we have a pretty high distribution. Over here, if I zoom in a little bit, you see in Pittsburgh, Indiana, Michigan area, Ohio area. We got some clustering over there. We even have a good chunk of them over here in Virginia, DC area, over here in, you can just kind of get an idea of where the clumping is happening, right? So if you want to move to Utah, Salt Lake City at the time looked like there were only about 2 jobs, and it looked like they were located in specifically, let's click on this one and see, senior business analyst in Lehigh, that's how you say that. And then over here in Salt Lake, they have another job as well. So that's another thing, cool feature that I added in. You can go and you can click around and you can see the information specifically for where you're looking at on the map. If you want to get more specific and spatially figure out where you're at. And with this dashboard in mind, the goal was to just take all the important things about a job to me as a user, to sort of isolate that and say, okay, how much are they paying? Will they let me work remote? Because that's the most important thing right now. And just for freedom's sake, right? I just would rather, have a job in New York that pays, or work with a company, that works in a big city like that, but not have to deal with the big city. That would be ideal, right? Because a lot of these companies have headquarters in places that are just a little bit too congested for my liking. There's not a lot of people headquartering in really, really small cities around. Not so many tech companies headquartering in Birmingham, Alabama, or something like that, which might be a little bit more my speed, right? But I just sort of isolated all of the job information to just sort of equate to what would make sense to me, right? And then I could drill down from there. So this is just sort of like the first draft. Obviously, I could take this a lot farther, but I just kind of wanted to highlight this is the project, this is how I did it, and this is how it all came out. So if you've been with me this far, thanks so much for watching still. And drop a comment below if you want to know anything about how I did this. I'm probably going to do a class that shows how to do this as well, how to get all the data, because I'm sure a lot of job searcher folks who are handy with data science might want to do this, or if you're not, you might just want to learn the skill so you can do it yourself. It's fairly easy if you have access to the tools and resources. You could do this outside of ESRI. You could do it in Tableau or Power BI or even in Google to some extent. In Google Data Studio, the 3 that I just mentioned there, those are all free data visualization tools, and I might actually highlight how to do that in those tools. Not sure yet, but I'll probably be launching a course on this, so if you want to check out more content like this, definitely subscribe. If you like this video, throw it a thumbs up, and overall, thank you so much for watching, and have a good one.